Welcome to the Red, White News Show with Dean McMurray, the military medium.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Red, White, and News Show with yours truly, the military medium. Today, I have an extra special guest on today, Tom Spooner, who is one of the founders and ex-Special Forces. He is one of the founders of the Warrior Heart program. Welcome to the Red, White News Show, Tom.
Thank you, Dean, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Happy to be here.
So a little bit about you, which I found is really interesting. You know, for the viewers that aren't familiar, we were chatting a little bit ago about Max Martini, right? And when Max was on, the listeners remember the radio show, Max talked about a couple major nonprofits and organizations that he helps raise funds for and is really passionate about. And one of them was you guys. And, you know, it was interesting when I went to reach out to Max and look at other organizations, that was one of the, I guess, the targets, right? And saying as far as the Warrior Heart, not only the foundation, but the program itself, right? And so a little bit about your background. You're a 21-year Army veteran, ex-Special Forces, did some time at Delta, correct?
Correct.
So do you want to take the listeners through a little bit of your background and how the heck you got involved in Warrior's Heart?
Absolutely. And then telling you my background, it'll make a lot of sense why I'm doing what I'm doing now.
Sure.
So originally I'm from a small town in South Florida called Belle Glade. Have you ever heard of that, Dean? It's right next to
I don't.
It's right next to Pahokee and Clewiston.
Oh, now I know.
So that's my nervous joke telling piece.
Right.
But so a real small town on the southern end of Lake Okeechobee, and I joined the military in 1990. Prior to that, you know, I had an uncle of mine that was a Vietnam veteran, 3-tour Vietnam vet. My grandfather was in World War II. And so I was one of those kids, you know, 10 years old, running around U.S. paratrooper, death from above, T-shirts on and stuff. I've just always wanted to join the military. I attempted to go to college for a couple of years because my grandfather and my uncle said, well, if you're going to join, you need to be an officer, you know, and obviously ultimately respected them. And but that didn't work out to me. So I somehow I got some credits and I joined the military in 1990, in the summer of 1990, which is right when the Gulf War kicked off. So I was at basic training. I was 11 Hotel, not by choice, but they made me that, which is a towed missile gunner. But anyway, the first unit that I went to was the 82nd, first and 504th, and basic AIT. Went to jump school as a cadetiate, but then I went immediately to Saudi Arabia, you know, for the Gulf War. So I got there like in December, and then you know we ended up leaving there in April. So I was there for the big push piece, which was a big deal for me, being a civilian, you know, 4 months earlier, and then now I'm in a combat, you know, environment. We didn't get into any really big stuff there in the Gulf War, but it was big to me.
Right,
you know,
right.
Not big compared to what I went through, you know, in Iraq, Afghanistan, but at that time, you know, wow, it was a big deal. But it's to help set the tone, you know, for my military career, because like I said, I'm a super lifer, man. I just always wanted it. And so I went to the Gulf War. And then my whole career, I was fortunate of having these amazing combat veterans around me, right? Like even from the get-go. So I was fortunate enough to have, you know, my platoon sergeant at that time was a Vietnam veteran. You know what I mean? So it was like here,
Right.
You know, my battalion sergeant major, all these guys were in these books that I had read as a kid growing up, you know, and that really shaped me going in there. And so I was in the 82nd from 90 to 95. Significant things that happened in there is I went to Ranger School really early and got lucky and made it through, just because I was tough and wouldn't
Sure.
quit really. But at that time, there weren't many folks with Ranger tabs that weren't officers or, had come from regiment. So, after that, I got jump master, I got path, just kind of everything opened up for me. So I loved my time in the 82nd. And one of the significant things that I got taught by my platoon sergeant, because I'd finished PLDC, and I was a corporal. And he asked me, he's like, "Oh, so what's the missions of an NCO, or what's your duties, And it's like, mission first and health and welfare of the troops, And he's like, yeah, okay. He's like, what does health and welfare of the troops mean? And I gave him the PLDC answer, like, provide guidance, direction, and all this, and know their families and stuff. He's like, no, jackass. It means that you give them the ability to survive and thrive in combat.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that, as a 22-year-old corporal, that was a different category than what the books had said, and
Right.
but from that moment, and then, up until today, what I mean? That is, health and welfare of the troops, and mission first is just, it's in my blood, it's in my veins, and I like being that way. So it's just what I continue to do. But another significant thing that happened whenever I struggled with alcoholism at a young age. And in 1992, I got sober, involved in 12-step programming, very spiritual based, and, and just helping other guys out too, mainly soldiers. So the rest of my military career, I was very active in that programming and stuff. So at 90 to 95 in the 82nd, then from 96 to 2001, I was in 7th Special Forces Group as an 18 Charlie explosive guy. Deployed to Central South America pre 9/11, all training missions and stuff like that, teaching. Loved every minute of it. And then September of 2001, I went out to selection for Delta. I mainly just went because I didn't want to regret of not trying. I never thought I'd make it.
Right.
I was like, well, let me just give it a shot, and I already had 11 years in the military. I was a senior E7, so again, I really didn't think I'd meet somehow, I made it. And then I was an operator out at the unit from 2001 until 2011. I ended up doing 12 deployments, 40 total months time in combat during my time there. And so during that time, where it kind of ties into it, in 2006, I ate a really close mortar round. And I got a traumatic brain injury, but I didn't know, at the time, during those times, everybody we knew had been blown up to some degree, you know what I mean? So It was like, oh, wow. Yeah. Got knocked out, but it was pretty significant. So from 2000, that was in 2006, and my last deployment was, in 2009. So continued on doing that. But at the end of my career, I've been banged up pretty good. I had a broken back surgery, all that. I couldn't wear kit without taking narcotics, and then being sober, that wasn't going to work. Hey,
right.
That stuff didn't work for Elvis. I knew it wasn't going to work for me. You know what I mean? And,
right. Yeah.
So the thing is I got tested, and I came back like, positive testing, 50%, processing speed in my brain and 50% verbal memory. So a lot of stuff going on. And I had a tremendous amount of PTS going on at that time. But again, I didn't really know it. I mean, I was performing in my job, kind of noticed it at home a bit. I wasn't myself. Nothing bad was happening. I have a wife and 2 boys, and my wife and I, have been together for 30 years, this November. My sons are 21 and 18 now, but I wasn't who I wanted to be. What I knew to be as a father and a husband and a man, that had really degraded, and the shift occurred where I was really just focused on my team and that piece. So, but I really couldn't do anything about it. There was a lot of confusion going on. So whenever I decided to retire, the reason why I have 21 is I ended up getting medically retired even after the time for all the stuff with my back and PTS and the TBI. And so whenever I got out of that, like I said, I've always been passionate about our population, suffering with chemical dependencies, self-medication, whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs. I mean, I'm by no means against alcohol. It's a huge part of our communities, but I am against it if it's destroying yourself or your family. And so what everyone else should too, so, but it was, so I was always involved in that. When I first got out, it was a better transition for me to kind of continue doing what I was doing. So I taught a lot of law enforcement, pistol, carbine, CQB, sniper stuff. So I didn't really want to learn anything new other than the business aspects of it. And so that was a good little transition piece. And I've still felt part of the fight, still had a solid mission in my life, putting food on the table and giving back still, which was very important for me. And then I met Josh and Lisa Lannon in 2013. And those are my partners in Warriors Heart. And the shorter version of it, and we'll talk more about it, I'm sure, but it was, we met up and we got the property in 2015, 2016. We opened in April of 2016, we opened up for business, primary diagnosis, chemical dependencies with co-occurring conditions of PTS, moral grief and injury, and those kind of things. And since then, on almost 4 years, we've had almost 900 folks come through.
Wow.
So it's a little bit. So everything that we do out there at Warriors Heart, is experience based. We're not practicing any new age theories out there. We're going with tried and true things that are battle proven. As far as that give our guys and gals the tools that they need to live free, what I mean, of any kind of chemical dependency, and enjoy and love life. And super proud, what I mean, of doing that and being a part of it. And yeah, that's the short version.
Wow.
That's the short version of 30 years.
Right. Well, and it's interesting. You talk about, kind of rewind that a little bit, and you talk about, because you actually came in, I think, about a year after I did. I came in '89, and of course, obviously, took a few different turns. But the thing that I would share is that mentality back then was completely different. I think you would agree, because it was almost that post-Vietnam. I mean, I had a lot of Vietnam veterans as leaders as well. And it was a completely different climate, and they were still teaching not only the doctrine, but also the mentality that it took to survive and win on the battlefield in Vietnam.
Yes.
And it has completely, and obviously understand that doctrine and tactics have to change, but it's almost like the mentality has changed as well. And you talked about that platoon sergeant or that NCO talking to you about, no, dumbass, it's, kind of, but saying that's the book answer that you were going off of what, and back in those days when they used to call it PLDC, right? Saying, but now it's like, no, there's deeper meanings to these things. And whether it's to fight and win on the battlefield or, and does the battlefield necessarily have to be in theater? It can be in your backyard, right? It can be whatever, I guess you choose it to be or make it to be, right?
Absolutely.
So interesting. You talked about a little bit about, and I won't hold it against you that you were in the 504th. Love a sister unit. I was in the 505th. So love Bragg, love my time there. So running down our dens every morning. And talking about routines, so we talk about every morning. One of the things that I'm reading here is in the Warrior Heart program, talking about tried and true things. You guys like doing repetition, like a training program with familiar routines, so it doesn't feel like a hospital. Example, chow is at 0.6, so a set routine that you can incorporate in your life so things become more routine, correct?
Absolutely. And the thing is that's why we're the only facility in the nation that services just our population. When I say our population, I mean warriors. So basically, if you face life and death on a daily basis as a profession, that's the population of Warriors Heart. So we have firefighters, and we're predominantly veterans and active duty, usually about between 60 and 70%, depending on the month, and but we do have our first responders in there, our firefighters, our EMTs, and law enforcement, right? Because we know the power of the peer network, right? Like me sitting across from a business guy trying to heal, even though we have to do the same things, we're just not going to have those connections. Or a cop sitting across from a drug dealer, so we understand the power of a peer network. And even though say a stateside paramedic and a combat veteran may have very different physical experiences, the thing that gets us inside is always the same. It's the children, it's the non-combatant, it's all of those things. So that's why we start off with that pool of that peers that is there, because everybody has everyone has either been to a basic training, an academy, where it's that regimented routine, right? So at Warriors Heart, and the other thing about our population, we hate hospitals, right? And we know environment matters when it comes to healing and care. Hospitals definitely have their place, right? And so it's like I said, it's a 540-acre ranch in Bandera, Texas, and it was an old Conoco oil executive retreat. So it's basically a resort. It's these nice cabins. It was all pre-existing when we got it. So the environment matters, the peer group matters, and then like what you were saying, everything out there is to remind them of who they are, right? Because they're coming to us at the lowest they've ever been in their lives, and but they weren't always that way. Most folks that, are alcoholics and addicts, they were the top dogs in any field if you look at it, and so the things that we have is just, we want to make it, we're asking them to change their whole lives in some aspect, but not who they are, right? And so everything that we do is just to remind them of who they are, not of who they are not, and so the regiment, it's not a military setting though, right? Because a lot of military guys, they don't like that shit no more. Like, so it's not by any means a military setting, but there's these different things that are familiar, like it is with our scheduled chow times, with our scheduled meeting times. There's that battle rhythm and there's that flow that's like, okay, I remember and it provides that structure, and structure psychologically equals security. Hey, if I don't have to worry about what's going on, then I can relax, and get to the business of figuring some stuff out, so having that structure in place. And just with our curriculum, with our population, we have a metal shop, we have a wood shop, we have regular art, we have fishing, and these two sweet bass ponds, biggest one's 11.5 is the current record, out there. But they do all this hard work and intensive emotional work, which requires enormous amounts of courage. And it's not battlefield courage, it's completely more terrifying to me anyway than sitting down and talking about my emotions or things that I'm struggling with another human being. I would rather be in a gunfight personally than have to do that. But the thing is that that's the tools of the trade when it comes to healing of our mind, body, and spirit. It's just like they taught us in the military, mind, body, and spirit become that war machine, which is appropriate. Now it's like, okay, now we have to learn how to live outside of the machine, and it's for some people, it's very easy. Some people just transition and live happy, productive lives. Other people, struggle a little bit. And then some people, man, it's absolutely devastating, and so that's why, and I know I'm over talking, but I get
No,
obviously super passionate about it, man.
no, it's awesome. It's perfect. So, the statistics, like, we always lose more veterans to suicide
Yeah.
from the, in a sense, the war at home, right? And
Yep.
versus in combat, which is sad. But, it's commendable that you guys are doing everything that you can to reverse or quell those numbers. So let me ask you, Tom, now, do you guys partner with psychologists, or because you're dealing with a lot of different, and I'm not a psychologist by any means, or a doctor or anything, but I'm sure there's a lot of technical psychosis stuff, and or is this all peer-to-peer stuff?
No, man, it's so Warriors Heart is a licensed chemical dependency facility, right? So it's a minimum 42-day inpatient treatment facility.
Okay.
And one thing, and just a term that they use in that field that I had to learn myself is they call it levels of care, right?
Okay.
So it really defines, hey, what is the population? So our level of care, who we couldn't accept there is, say, someone with extreme bipolar or schizophrenia or huge amounts of psychosis, that aren't kind of functional, kind of piece where they need to be in a hospital environment, because they're going to hurt themselves or others. So our level of care is for the folks that are just, again, not those extreme psychological issues that they have. It's just kind of the normal psychological issue, right? The PTSD,
right?
Because once we get that level of care right, you know what I mean, then we can commence to work. Because the deal is that, I've talked to many psychologists, and they'll tell you that, hey, treating chemical dependencies, mild traumatic brain injury, and post-traumatic stress is a very complex issue. And my thing to that is that, yes, it is complex for them, but that's Tuesday afternoon at Warriors Heart and Wednesday morning. You know what I mean? Like, hey, I get it that it's complex. It'd just be like, in our terms, if you were trying to explain an airborne operation to a non-airborne unit, then they would be like, what? I don't know, man. Right. It takes a lot. It's like, nah, we do this every night at midnight, and so the thing is that, that is because we are the population, because I had been all that I had been through. It's like, okay, that's one of the deals that I provide at Warriors Heart is Warriors Oversight, right? Because we have our PhD psychologists, we have our clinicians, we have our nurses. And so it's my job, kind of as the elder and the senior warrior there, is like, hey, I know what this population can handle. I know how much therapy they can receive, because everybody wants, the psychologists want it to be more psych, right? The docs want it to be more doc. Everybody, because they're so passionate in what they're doing, it takes, someone who's kind of, I always go back to a talk, where it's like, at the end of the day, you got your logistics, you got your intel, you have all these guys feeding the commander information. But at the end of the day, there's a warrior that says, okay, thank you for all that information. Here's what we're going to do. Right. And so that's what we do out there. That's why the programming, but back to the beginning of your question is, yes, we have licensed chemical dependency counselors, and we have licensed practitioners counselors, which handle the trauma. Because the big thing is, in the military system and just the system in general, they try to segregate all these different things. Like, if you're struggling with chemical dependencies, go over here. If you're struggling with traumatic brain injury, come here. If you're struggling with PTS, go over here. So they're very siloed off.
Sure.
But we're not siloed off. Like, all of these three things are happening in between my ears right now, Right. So the thing is we know that, because a lot of people will get in our conversations of, well, is the trauma is making this chemical dependency piece come, or is it the chemical dependency piece that brings up all the trauma? Who gives a shit? Let's treat them both at the same time,
right?
and move on. You know, I mean, we have things to do. You know, I mean, we have lives to live and people to help, you know, and
Right.
families to raise and jobs to go to, and all this stuff that our population has fought their whole lives for. You know, I mean, the last thing we want is for them not to enjoy the fruits of their labor, you know, and so that's why it all comes back to what we understand militarily. You know, when you're going through a training, an evaluation, you're either trained or untrained, right?
Right. Yep. There is no in between. Well, no, then it's not.
Exactly, right. So that's what we do out there, Warriors Heart, is that, because if you'd have asked me when I was struggling with PTS and TBI, if you'd have said, Tom, when was the last time you received your training on emotional stability, you know what I mean, and grounding techniques and understanding
Right.
this, well, never, then they'd say, well, then doesn't it make it sense why you're struggling? It was just like before I learned how to shoot a pistol accurately, you know what I mean? I was missing everything and I had someone teach me, and now I can do it.
Right.
See, with mental and emotional health, it's the exact same way. They try to make it into all this voodoo and just very unobtainable kind of stuff. But to a certain, with our level of care, it's like they just need the training. So our guys and gals come in and they get cleaned up, they get trained up, and they go right back into the fight, because that's the goal. You know, we're not trying to change who they are. I mean, that's what I've always said. I've always been a fighter. You know what I mean? At a cellular level, I'm always going to fight. It's just,
Right.
I don't even have to think about it. But I had to learn how to fight, like you said, in the war at home. Like, hey, the battlefield was over, and what I learned about the warrior path is hey, what do old warriors do? You know, we didn't die, you know, on
Right.
the battlefield. So here we are. Don't really know how we got here, you know, but here we are. It's like, what's my job now? You know, I'm not
Right.
out there with the youngins. It's like, well, as an older warrior, my job is to teach. My job is to assist. My job is to do it. I'm still on the warrior path. It's just, this is what it's all about now, you know?
You.
And with all the stuff that we do, it's all experience based. Back to those NCOs you and I
Right.
grew up with, you know, the reason why the information they gave us carried throughout our careers is because it was experience based information. Yeah, there was the books, but it was the experience. So whenever it comes
Right.
to healing our warriors now, you know, it's again back to the same principles. It's like, hey, what's experience based that is working? You know, and that's what we do out at Warriors Heart. Uh, and you know what I mean? But just like any training course, right? Any tough training course, you got some people that go to the course, get a first time go, and do great, wonderful things. You got other people that struggle a little bit. They had to recycle, you know, and then a
Yeah.
retest, right? But they work a little harder. Next thing you know, then they're off doing it. And you got some people that were just completely not ready, you know what I mean? And you know, and found that out.
Yeah.
So this course is we meet everybody wherever they're at in their journey, from a homeless veteran on the street, you know, to a fully functioning active duty guy. You know what I mean? So we meet everybody where they are. That's why it's not a cookie cutter kind of programming. We have state licensing of, you know, and it's kind of drug and alcohol rehab and PTS 101, but how we go about it is much different, because there's a big difference between being a victim and a volunteer, right? And warriors are volunteers, even though we experience the same traumas that someone, you know, we volunteered to put ourselves in those positions to get traumatized, right? It's
Yeah.
which is damn good on us. You know what I mean? It's like you know, I always say, man, people with PTS, they look at it as shameful and guiltful and, you know, all that stuff that goes on. It's like, man, we should have a damn medal for it, because it means that I actually did something in life, you know, was willing to risk to put myself in a position to have nightmares and to be hyper vigilant and to, you know, have these issues that I have. I mean, it should be a badge of honor, not of shame, you
Right.
know. And, so a lot of it is perspective and mindset, not any foo-foo, you know, fun-loving stuff, but it's, yeah, you know, I mean, it's really good.
Good. And one of the things that I know in your journey, I don't think we've talked about it yet, but I know you said that you had in the past, you had struggled with alcohol and
Uh-huh.
and other stuff, some PTS, and at one point, you almost took your own life.
I did in 2010. In 2010, my TBI and my PTS untreated. You know, I mean, the symptoms were crazy. So my symptoms were, I mean, I worked in the same place and lived in the same place for 10 years straight, right? It's a 20-mile drive, maybe 4 turns in it, you know, back
Right.
countries. You know, I've done it twice a day at minimum, every day.
Right.
Well, at the end of it, and again, it's 2010 before the iPhone, but I used to have to put my address in the GPS to get home because I'd get lost.
Sure.
I was having all kinds of these different symptoms, and again, I hadn't got diagnosed with the TBI, so I thought I was just losing my mind. Again, like, why am I not functioning? But in typical grunt fashion, it's like, well, I just keep going, you know, just
Right. Yep.
keep going, and so then, so I, you know, my head just wouldn't be quiet, you know, whether it was emotions, whether it was flashbacks, whether it was just not think. I mean, I wasn't sleeping well. You know what I mean? I had all these emotions. I was getting ready to retire, just a lot going on. And so in my mind, I was like, okay, I used all my tools in the tool belt. Like, I tried prayer. Nope, didn't work to quiet my head. You know, I tried meditation. Nope, didn't work. Tried working with others. Nope, didn't work. Time with my family. Nope, didn't work. It's like, okay, well, what else works? And it's like, well, I know what bullets do to brains, you know, and I know that'll shut it down. So whenever I did almost take my own life, it wasn't because of like an emotional reason, like, oh, they'd be better off, or shame and guilt.
Sure.
It was no, due to my TBI, I thought that was a good course of action.
Okay.
Well, so I'm sitting there going through in, you know, military decision-making process and troop leading procedures on why, you know, utilizing this Glock 17, you know what I mean, to stop this noise in between my head. So I'm literally going through that decision-making process, and then moment of clarity, grace of God, whatever you want to call it. But I realized what I was doing. And I was like, holy shit, I'm just thinking that shooting myself is a valid course of action for making this stop. And that's where, so there was 2 reasons. One of them was that, and the other one is I had one of my best friends, still one of my best friends, another warrior, you know, on me the whole time. Hey man, you need some help. Hey man, you need some help. Hey man, you need some help. And then, you know, when all that occurred with me, that was the critical moment where I totally gave in, because I didn't go get help because, not because of ego and not because of pride, was because I couldn't figure it out. It was like, no, I'm the guy that helps people. I mean, I pride myself on that, you know what I mean, of serving others, of being the guy, you know, jumping tall buildings in a single bound and rescuing hostages. Like, no, I'm the guy that brings the help. And so what happened that now I'm the guy that needs the help? You know, I just kind of got stuck in that loop of like, well, I didn't understand, you know what I mean? And again, back with the TBI piece, I couldn't think straight, right? Because the TBI affects all executive functioning, right? Your decision-making stuff. So it's quite a pickle.
Right.
That's why, you know, a lot of those folks, you know what I mean, that take their own lives, you know what I mean? A lot of times they're alone. And the only thing, and then one of the main reasons why, for me, I can say it, the only reason why I survived what I did is because I wasn't struggling with chemical dependencies. You know, I wasn't drinking or using drugs on top of all that mess that I had going on. You know, because when someone has all those things going on, you know, that's our suicide rate. You know what I mean? It's a mess, you know. And one thing that I do want to say is that just because I like changing the narratives, you know, we're not ever going to fight stigmas and all that stuff, but you know,
Right.
we can always change the narrative. And you know, and I always use it with people whenever they're asking me about things, you know, hey, if guys want help and stuff, it's like, you know, all the things that we went through in the military career, I'll just use myself as, you know, that any course that I went to, any selection that I went to, it guaranteed a lot of things, you know, in a psychological profile. The 2 main things that it guaranteed is, number 1, I'll never quit. And number 2, I'll never ask for help. Right. That's how I made it through all those courses. And so now you tell me, Tom, if you're struggling, hit me up, bro. You know, I'm like, hey, Roger that. Like, it's not happening. Like,
Right.
I mean, because I don't want to bring the team down. I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to do all that. Like, I can figure it out. Just keep going. Just keep going. So that's why the narrative for me is I have to reach out to others. You know what I mean? I hit those buddies up, just checking in. You know, not anything crazy or getting into the business. Like,
Right.
hey, bro, just checking in. I'm doing good. You know what I mean? Just checking in. And then if they open up, then I do it too. You know. And but anyway, I talk a lot, don't I, D?
No, it's good. It's good. No, it's good. You can tell that you can feel your passion behind it.
Yeah, man, I do.
Well, that's good. And that, and that really shows. And obviously, you've been doing this more than a year. And, and I was just looking at this, this information sheet and, and over the years that you have been, working with, I'll call them America's Warriors. You guys have been really featured in just about everything and really featured on everything. And that just really goes a testament of what you guys are doing. Right. And so it's just allowing your work to speak for yourself. It's not about grandstanding or anything, but those are great platforms but one thing I would ask you, Tom, is, why and how, or, how can people get involved as a community to help heal those that help protect us? So whether they're our fellow veterans, maybe active duty service members, hell, maybe even a family member of those service members or the first responders. How could they get involved as a community to do that?
Yeah, so there's what I've seen in my own experience, and again, I stay within my own experience, and that way I'm always right, because you can argue with my opinion, you can't argue with my experience.
Right.
And what I've seen help the most is when it comes to helping the communities. Number one, every community, they know who their veterans are. You know what I mean? A lot of times, you know what I mean? And so I would start, you know what I mean, at home and in our own communities, number one. And then when we say help, a lot of people think it's this big, I mean, like having a cup of coffee, like, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't take anything too big. If I show human kindness to another human being, because just like the old saying, like, I have no idea what anyone's struggling with in this life. Whoever I run into, I mean, they could be on the verge of that's the day when they were thinking about hurting themselves or others, you know? And if I can just be the best that I can to that person and just be kind, and then do that with another veteran, you know, and with the community, you know, that's the ripple effect that is huge, you know. And then outside of that, just kind of expanding, you know what I mean, keep growing it out, you know. And then one of the ways, I mean, personal to me, obviously, is Warriors Heart Foundation. You know, Warriors Heart Foundation, what it does is subsidizes treatment costs for our veterans that are struggling with chemical dependencies. Because, you know, a lot of times they burn through everything they have in their life, you know. And you take a dude that's a veteran for 4 years, you know what I mean, he gets out, he doesn't have retirement, he doesn't have anything, right? And so we have this, the Warriors Heart Foundation helps subsidize treatment costs. And we have other people that help do that, like the Sinise Foundation, Simplify Fund. There's several large organizations that assist, because a lot of people don't really understand or want to deal with, hey, this problem of alcoholism and drug addiction. You know what I mean? And so that's one way, but I can just, again, I always like to stick with things that I know. If I reach out to the veterans that I know and the members of the community, you know, because it's very important for our veterans that are in a space of being healthy to reach out to our community, right? Because what's the normal veteran thing is like, those stupid civilians, they don't understand. You know how veterans start talking.
Right. Yeah.
You know, like, oh, you don't get it. And it's like, hey, yeah, man, why don't they get it? The reason why they don't get it is because we're not telling them.
Yep.
How are they supposed to get it? I'm not talking about telling them war stories or anything like that, but you know what I mean? But us we're allegedly the stronger, you know what I mean? As far as the warrior piece, it's like, hey, it's up to us to reach back into our communities you know what I mean? And be like, hey, we're veterans, and hey, this is how we can help the community, which is where I struggle the most, you know, because it's easier to be with our own kind, right? I mean, that's why I love Warriors Heart. That's why I love everything that we do. But the thing that I push myself to do is like, hey, what am I doing for the community? Whether if it's informing them, I mean, heck, it doesn't matter as long as I'm doing something. I say, pick something that you enjoy doing yourself, and then
Right.
just expand that, you know, because otherwise it turns into some bullshit New Year's resolution thing that only lasts for 30 days.
Right.
I'm just
Turn
speaking
it.
for myself.
Well, it turns into the gym membership you never use, right?
Yeah. But if I pick something, you know, that, hey, I kind of am into art, you know what I mean? Or, hey, I'm kind of in whatever it is that I'm into, woodworking or something with the community college down the road, you know what I mean? Of, hey, what are you guys doing for veterans here? You know, or and just doing something has always been ultimately healthy for me personally. And I found that it's pretty much the same for other human beings, you know, having that mission and task and purpose in life, you know, of getting up and doing the hard work, you know, because, you know, I mean, I have a lot of struggles. I mean, there's a lot of days that where it's like I'm struggling, whether it's with TBI stuff or just being a human, you know, I don't
Right.
know, you know, but but what always brings me out of it is others. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, I have a purpose. My purpose is to serve. You know what I mean? Now I just serve in a different capacity than I did on the battlefield. You know?
Well, it's interesting. It's very fitting that as we do, we're in the last week of March as we do this interview. Even though this won't air until this, later this spring. But it's interesting that March is Brain Injury Awareness Month,
Right.
right? And of course, it brings a lot of awareness to, and really, I know that, as a community, I guess or as a culture, we love to have special events for things regardless. And I think it's really, again, bringing awareness, right? So this Brain Injury Awareness Month, and we have different months as well, like month of the military child and everything else is like, so as we go forward, it's, I just found it very fitting. But one of the last questions I wanted to ask you, Tom, is what is the best way for somebody to thank a warrior for their service?
Hmm. I mean, personal, just
Yeah,
personal.
personally, like, what's the best way to thank a warrior for the service?
Man, what I've found, what I do, because I'm really big on doing that, not just because I'm a veteran, like that makes me immune from
Right?
thanking others, you know. So especially the Vietnam guys, you know, not many of
Yep.
our World War II ones left, but you know, when they're wearing their hats in the airport, you know,
Yep.
and even the active duty folks in uniform, what I've found in the wording is that I go up to them and I say, "Thank you for what you have done for me and my family."
Mm.
You know, instead of because I'm not offended by if someone says, "Man, thank you for your service." Like that doesn't,
Right.
like,
Right.
I appreciate that. I get it. Some veterans it kinds of, well, I don't get it, but some veterans it rubs them the wrong way and this and that. So to blanket that, I was like, okay, well, I don't want to piss anybody off either. And you know, especially me being a veteran, it's like,
Right.
hey, jackass, I'm a veteran too. You know, if they started being a dick,
Right.
with it,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
but
Right.
but the
Right.
thing is like, so what I do is I go up to them, and that includes law enforcement and firefighters, you know, and everyone that gives me a safe and protected home. You know,
Right.
they
Right.
did it for us while we were gone. But my thing is I go to them and I say, thank you for, if they're active duty, it's like, thank you for what you do for me and my family. Or if they're veterans, it's like, hey, thank you for what you have done for me and my family. You know, and that usually just is, it changes the whole dynamic. If there's a conversation, a lot of times it leaves them kind of like, what the hell did he just say to me? You know what I
Right.
mean? Kind of deal.
Right.
Because I mean it, you know, and
Right.
so there's that impact. But I mean, again, back to, if you're into it, there's nothing wrong if you're trying to help veterans. There's no good way, just do something. You know what I
Right.
mean? That's what I
Right.
always, you know, a lot of people kick it around their head so much trying to figure out what to do that they don't do anything, where it's like, man, I know so and so is a veteran, like I'm just going to go check in on him, or I'm going to send him a text, or I'm going to He's got weeds in his yard. I'm going to go throw some damn fertilizer on it.
There you go.
But I'm a pretty simple, practical kind of guy because those kind of solutions are sustainable. And I hate pep rallies and, things that are flash in the pan, So I think the more that we can just be true to ourselves and to one another, the best that we can,
Right.
me screwing it up on a daily basis, but still staying in the fight. It matters, it matters what we do as an individual level. It may matter significantly, we never know, and
Right.
so that's why I try not to be a jackass at the most I can. I screw that up.
That's all right though. It's like, that's because, but thing is that it shows that you're trying, you're putting one foot in front of the other. And,
Absolutely.
you're not going to make a jackass out of yourself if you're not trying, but that just means you're not moving forward either. Right.
Absolutely.
And so, there's, it's always interesting. So it's like, sometimes you're damned if you do it, damned if you don't. And sometimes you just got to do it. Keep on pushing through. Right.
Yeah. That old "to thine own self be true," like,
That's
hey man,
right.
do what you think is right. And, and then you'll have an experience and you'll learn.
Right. Well, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Tom, thank you so much for being a guest today. It really means a lot. Hopefully here soon in the very near future, maybe I can make it out to great state of North Carolina and give the facility a look over, and maybe we can even do a live broadcast or something. That'd
Love
be
it.
kind of fun. Yeah. So
That'd be awesome.
it's so fun as we were talking about a lot of folks that I've interviewed in the past. They always seem to show up and posting up on social media. I'm like, oh, we got to get out there one day and kind of do it up. But again, thank you for your service. Thank you, more importantly, what you are continuing to do for our nation warrior, and and really allowing us to kind of shine a spotlight on you and the organization, just doing great things. So thank you,
Dean, and thank you so much for having me, and really appreciate the time and having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Anytime, brother, you're more than welcome. So thanks for being a guest today on the Red White News Show.